So as you can see, Bobby Abreu was pretty good. And I think he is the best Venezuelan to ever wear a Phillies uniform. All right, so let's take a look. There he is. Look at that smile. What a guy. All right, so he's born in 1974. He spends about 16 years, developing, growing, getting the fuck out of Venezuela before all that shit happened in the 90s. Just a quick overview of his beginning of his career. Signed as an amateur by the Houston Astros. He comes up with the Astros, then gets drafted by the Devil Rays in their expansion draft. RIP to one of the best names in sports. Gets traded to the Phillies after getting drafted. He gets traded by a 93 favorite, sort of favorite, not really because he wasn't that good, Kevin Stocker. And he gets traded to a team that is pretty terrible, like really bad, the 97 Phillies. So, Bobby Abreu comes over, 2-year-old me loves it. Here's young Bobby with those god-awful Astros uniforms. All right, so comes to America. He spends 6 years in the minors. He gets called up by Houston in 96. He pinch hits late in the game. It didn't count as an at-bat, so he probably walked, thinking about like probabilities of plays where you don't get an at-bat credited. Spends 97, about half the year with the Astros, a little less than half a year. He's underutilized, only plays 59 games, and he's traded to the Phillies. Phillies pick him up, first full season in 98, plays 151 games, so obviously pretty much your starting right fielder. Has a pretty high batting average, 312, 906 OPS. Dude is showing a lot of promise. So he spends the next 8 years with the Phils, averages 157 games. Important note, I think, and I'm going to come back to this again, he plays every game, 162 games, at age 27 and at 31, which I feel like guys cross over the age of 30, at least nowadays. We see that less and less. Dude was durable. At least from a fan perspective, he always got off to slow starts. I felt like he didn't like cold weather. When you get a cold start in April, I felt like he always spun his wheels a little bit. Obviously, Venezuela not known for a cold climate. So let's talk about just averages with the Phils for 8 years. He averaged 305 batting average, 933 OPS. So we all know he wasn't a prolific home run hitter, which means that to have an OPS that high, he did enough slugging, meaning doubles, triples, to drive up that number. He averaged per season 178 singles and 42 doubles. Okay, pretty good. Pretty good. All right, let's keep going here. So we'll take a look at some of his other awards, maybe a couple other stats. One Gold Glove, just one, which is pretty good considering he was afraid of the wall always. 1 Silver Slugger, 2 All-Star appearances, not cool, or cool. He signed a long-term deal in the offseason before 2002, which many of you, if you've watched the 2002 Phillies video yearbook as many times as I have, they do a cool little segment. The Phillies paid him. He got his payday, which is pretty cool. He averaged almost 100 walks, one shy of 100 walks, which is pretty good. You're hitting for average, you hit for slug, and your OPS is high, and you can average about 100 walks a season. Yeah. And obviously, because he was durable, he played a lot. He averaged almost 700 plate appearances per year with the Phils. So, I mean, we're looking at a great Phillies player. Let's be real. Found this great picture as a Met, which I know is weird to see. He's almost at the wall. Almost there. Could only imagine him at Wrigley. All right, so goodbye, Bobby. We traded him, unfortunately, to the Yankees right before the deadline in 2006. It is age 32 season. We traded him for 4 prospects that no one ever heard of again. They never panned out. I'm pretty sure all 4 of them never came up to the majors, at least with the Phillies. So, yeah. Just something that I always kind of think about. Had we not traded him, okay, obviously he was, I don't want to say declining, but obviously we traded him because he still had some value. So he was probably, he's still producing, but he could have been a bench bat, pinch hitter, bench bat for the 08 team. And I think, for those guys that were part of that mid-2000s rise, I kind of think he deserved a ring. I don't know. There were a lot of those guys I'm not going to say Tomas Perez deserved to get a ring with us, but Bobby Abreu, I think. And he continued to play for another 8 years till he was 40. All right, we'll take a look at some of those. Spent 2.5 years with the Yankees. His average in OPS dropped a little bit, but he's still, again, averaging over 150 games for all of his years with the Yankees. he averaged 175 hits, so he's still a hit machine. Okay, I always think of like the 200 hits benchmark as like impressive. He's averaging 175 in his mid-30s. Pretty cool. Obviously, he still had some value. The Yankees let him walk, but the Angels picked him up. They thought he still had value, and they picked him up in 2009. He misses out on another World Series ring that the Yankees, obviously got in 2009. Angels thought he still had value. I think he did as well. They picked him up. All of those key stats continued to decline. Played an average of 148 games, so again, not as durable, but honestly, for a guy in his mid-30s, not bad. He also, coincidentally, got his highest MVP voting placement in his career. Which is interesting. I guess if you have to talk about, those early 2000s, there were lots of power hitters winning those MVPs. They started to die off as the steroid era ended. So, he kind of got maybe a little shafted there. I don't know. I don't think he would have really made a dent in any other year. Angels released him in early 2012. The Dodgers picked him up. Nothing really exciting there. They let him walk in free agency. Interestingly enough, the Phillies signed him in January and let him go in March. So, cool, Ruben Amaro Jr., I guess. And the Mets signed him 4 days later because, of course, they did. It's the Mets. And they released him at the end of the season. And that was basically his age 40 season, and he was pretty much done at that point. And like we see a lot of those players, as the late 30s come, they definitely start to decline a lot more. So, yeah, he retired. But 18 years in the bigs, pretty good friggin' career. So, retired. Got some comparison slides for you here. I posted those career averages there. A couple things that I think stand out. Over 18 years, okay, remember 18 years is a pretty respectable career amount. Mike Schmidt played for 18 years. So over 18 years, he averaged a full season of games played. Impressive. Almost 700 play appearances per season. That's what he averaged. Okay, over 150 hits, which for an average for a guy that plays for 18 years, I think that's pretty impressive. He was never really a power hitter, so you'll see that his home run averages, 19 home runs. You're not putting Bobby Abreu on your team because you want home runs. You're just not. He did win the home run derby in 2005, though, which was cool. I remember as a kid, the Phillies starting to enter that national conversation, 05, 06, with Howard winning the MVP and the home run derby. Obviously, 07, when the run started. It was really cool for me to see the Phillies, starting to get into that national conversation. So that always makes me feel good. He did also, I'd like to note, he did have some pop, averaging 27 stolen bases per season, which is impressive considering he was kind of a bigger guy. So let's put those numbers into some context real quick. Top three players he's most similar to. Luis Gonzalez, Arizona Diamondback guy, won a World Series with them. He's cool, not a Hall of Famer. Bernie Williams, won a bunch of World Series with the friggin' Yankees. Cool, not a Hall of Famer. Dwight Evans, Red Sox great. Played 30 years before Bobby, so completely different era. I guess you can compare him, but again, not really useful. All those three players are not Hall of Famers. Okay, if we look at the black ink, which is basically just the well-known important stats, batting averages, hits, none of the big sabermetric stats that have come in the past 10 years, his ranking there, his number is 5. Okay, a likely Hall of Famer would have a score of 27. Okay, so really lacking there. Ranking of the gray ink, which basically is the same as the black ink, but gives you credit for being in the top 10 in any of those categories. His score there is 88. A likely Hall of Famer would be 144. Okay, so yeah, he was in the top 10 of a lot of those categories, like hits and stuff like that, but not a lot to really bump up that number. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about one of my favorite Hall of Fame metrics. It has to do with WAR. It's Jaws. Okay, so just a quick overview. If we look at Bobby Abreu, he's got a career WAR of 60.2, which, I mean, cool. For a right fielder, an average Hall of Fame right fielder has 71.9. He's not that far under, okay? His peak 7-year WAR was 41.6, and I think it's important to note that 7-year peak does not mean consecutively. It just means 7 years that he was, his best 7 years. He's not too far under that, okay, because he was really good for a time span. So I think that a short time span. So I think that's why those numbers for Bobby and then for an average Hall of Famer are so close. Okay, and then his Jaws, right? Jay Jaffe came up with Jaws, basically comparing a player's Hall of Fame worthiness to other actual Hall of Famers. If you want to know more about that, go to Baseball Reference. A lot of it has to do with WAR. out of 27 right fielders in the Hall of Fame, he's definitely below, like we just said, the average of WAR and the 7-year peak WAR. So, yeah, he's not a Hall of Famer. He's not. And even though he got 5.5% on the ballot this year, I think that's going to decrease. I don't think he's going to get any more than that. He'll probably get off the ballot within his 10-year eligibility. I don't think he'll be on the ballot for all 10 years. You have to get at least, forget the percentage, I think it might be 5% to stay on the ballot, so he barely made it this year. So just kind of summarizing, childhood favorite of mine, of course, I don't think he passes the test to be considered a Hall of Famer. And also the test that I hear a lot of people use is, can you talk about that era of baseball without mentioning whatever player you're talking about? And I think we can all agree you can talk about, the late 90s or, early mid 2000s. You can talk about that era of baseball without mentioning Bobby Abreu. Okay. He was great here, definitely a core member of those teams, but he didn't make that crossover to really wider baseball appeal. So I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into Bobby Abreu's career. Yeah, go Phils.